Hey guys, I'm Claire from Bella Canvas. In today's video, we are going to cover everything you need to know about dye migration. We'll talk about what it is, what we do at Bella Canvas to prevent it during our fabric dyeing process, and tips for avoiding it when screen printing.
I'm Shane with Stoked on Printing, and dye migration is definitely an issue that screen printers deal with often, so today we'll show you some tips on how to mitigate that. Dye migration is where a garment has heated up too much during the curing process. It's allowed the ink to become a gaseous state, and some of the dye is actually coming up into the ink, changing the pigmentation of it. The way you would spot dye migration on a shirt is if you are looking at, for example, we'll say a red t-shirt, you've printed white ink on it, and either immediately or by the time you've received your shirts, it's turned pink. So you're gonna see some of that red dye that has come up into the ink. The quality of the t-shirt's essential to what happens with the dye migration process. So we see obviously on synthetic fibers, if there are inconsistencies within batches, that's where you can see even more migration happening, even within a single brand or line. Whenever printing Bella Canvas, we really haven't had many problems with dye migration. I think that's a lot due to the fact that there's centralized dyeing and just really consistency within runs. So something that we print maybe 6 months ago and we go to print it today, we really can depend on that quality and that consistency.
At Bella Canvas, we minimize the chance of dye migration by standardizing the high-quality dyes we use and the machines used in the dyeing process. If dye migration does occur, there are certain troubleshooting methods you can try during the print process to help identify what is causing it.
So the first step to mitigate dye migration is definitely going to be on press. You're going to be controlling your pallet temperatures, very critical, as well as understanding your flash times. If you're running your production, you want to make sure that things aren't getting too hot and you're maintaining a consistent temperature throughout the production run. You really want to understand your inks, and you want to know what is the correct ink for the garment that you're going to be using. Using a low bleed or a polyester ink are typically common on synthetic fibers that you know are going to bleed, and they help to mitigate that risk. Depending on what ink you're going to use, whether it be a traditional plastisol or maybe a water base or a low cure or low bleed ink, every one of them is going to have a different flash temperature as well as a different curing temperature. So understanding or knowing what that temperature is may be anywhere from 260 to 300 degrees typically. You want to maintain that temperature, not going too high on the synthetic fibers, because the hotter you go, it's going to allow it to have more of a chance to migrate. Another tip I would suggest is making sure that your dryer is correctly profiled. Sometimes you can have hot spots or cold spots within a dryer, so using a donut probe is definitely needed to be able to make sure that your dryer has consistent heat throughout its run. And you want to make sure that your ink is not being overcooked and it's just being cured to the exact temperature that it needs to be to fully cure. Offset your stacking when they're coming out of your dryer. Typically you'll see a lot of people that'll stack these into a printer's dozen and then go directly into the box, where you're retaining all that heat in the box, and over time, if you go and you ship that out, the box can even retain some of that heat in the middle, where your customer might receive those shirts and they're gonna say, your white ink is now pink on these red shirts, what happened? Even though as soon as you've seen it, as soon as it's come off the dryer, it was white. So it can happen over time just based on retaining that heat within the box.
Have you seen dye migration on your garments before? What has your experience been like preventing it? Let us know your take in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.